Hello and welcome to Eternal Durdles. I'm your host, Zach Clark, and with me as always, Phil Bleckman. Phil, welcome back.
Feels good to be back after, what, 2 weeks, 3 weeks off, 3 weeks away?
Yeah, it's been a couple of weeks.
I was traveling a lot for work, but I'm back. I'm ready to talk about the new spoilers. Thank you to Jake from Cantrip Cartel for stepping in while I was away.
And then we took a week off as well. So I took a little break as well, just to get in my vacation while I could too.
The intro can now return to its normal state.
Yes. So this week we're talking about the Battle for Baldur's Gate Commander Legend set, and we're going to kind of just go over the cards that we think are worth looking at, possibly picking up, but overall just discussing what this set's got to offer for Legacy.
Yeah, I mean there aren't too many like guaranteed hitters, but there are some potential role players that we'll dive into.
I've got a list of 23 cards that we can talk about, chirp a bit about, see how that goes. So I guess while we're on the subject, let's real quick. This episode is sponsored by the subscribe button. If you come here every month to find out what's on the hype train, just hit the subscribe button now. Like, just do yourself a favor. It's gonna help. You're gonna be here anyhow. You might as well help us out. Hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, all that stuff. It goes a long way to making sure that we get this content out to other people as well, which is why else do a podcast?
We're all gamers here, and we're trying to game the algorithm.
Exactly. So anyhow, with that said, let's start it off at Elminster. Just Elminster, the Planeswalker Elminster. Let's say what he does. He is a blue-white Planeswalker. He costs 3, 1 white and 1 blue. Legendary Planeswalker Elminster. Whenever you scry, the next instant or sorcery spell you cast costs X less to cast, where X is the number of cards you looked at while scrying this way. And then it has a +2 that is draw a card, then scry 2. So that's preordained. Not preordained.
Serum Visions.
Serum Visions. And then a -3 that is exile the top card of your library. You create a number of blue 1/1 fairy dragon tokens equal to the converted mana cost of this card, and he can be your commander, which is worthless text in our format, but it might mean something to somebody. Those
tokens have flying, by the way,
and they have flying. Yeah, they are blue fairy dragons with flying.
That's relevant text. Yeah.
So I don't know, Phil, what do you think about this? Obviously you've got Wandering Emperor, right? Like Wandering Emperor seems like the new hotness in your blue-white X control decks. You think this has a place?
The first thing that jumps out to me is the templating of where X is the number of cards looked at while scrying this way, instead of X is the number of cards you scried. I think it's interesting that they don't just make scry the verb. They had to add, a bunch more words. But either way, we had to talk about this card because it's, the marquee card of the set. Yeah. But it has no shot. It's competing. If let's say you were even remotely in the market for a 5-mana Planeswalker, this isn't even close to Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. And that card actually has relevant text at all times. Whereas even though this one has a +2, it exiling the top card, if you don't know the top card, you could flip a land and make 0 tokens.
Yeah.
Whereas Teferi will just remove whatever a problem permanent you have is. Teferi gives you a scry, like this one gives you a Serum Visions. Teferi's gives you draw a card plus and produce 2 mana because you get to untap.
And let's not forget about that ultimate. Like, holy crap. That ultimate on Teferi Hero Dominaria is game ending, right?
The other thing about this is that like the static ability on Elminster means that you need to put enough scry in your deck that by the time you have a 5-mana excuse me. The time you have a 5-mana Planeswalker, you would then have cards that scry after the fact to actually turn this on. Now, I get that it helps itself, right? It functionally reduces an instant or sorcery by 2 if you plus it.
Yeah.
But that is all to say that the numbers on this are too high. It is too expensive.
Yeah. I think if this was a 3-mana Planeswalker, we'd be talking about it in a more serious sense.
I think if it were a 3-mana Planeswalker with just like smaller numbers on it, it still would be tough because you're competing against Narset and Teferi Time Traveler, which means that you would unlikely see any play, particularly in these colors. But there would actually be way more of a conversation to be had there, because at that point you could theoretically be like, okay, on 3, and then if you have a bunch of preordains in your deck, you could draw a card, scry 2, preordain, scry 2, and then cast some massive discounted card.
Of course. Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on to the next card. Another Planeswalker. This is Minsc and Boo. Minsc and Boo Timeless Heroes. I'm sweet on this card, actually. Anyhow, let's go over what it does. It is a 2 red-green Planeswalker Minsc. And when it comes into the battlefield, you get and during your upkeep, you get a Boo legendary 1/1 red hamster creature token with trample and haste. Then his +1 is put 3 +1/+1 counters on up to 1 target creature with trample or haste. -2 is sacrifice a creature. When you do, Minsc and Boo Timeless Heroes deals X damage to any target, where X is the creature's power that you sacrificed. And then if the sacrificed creature was a hamster, draw X cards. And it starts out at 3.
So when this card was first spoiled, I remember I texted the chat with you and Nate, and I was like, this is stupid. I hate this. There's way too many words on it that all do too many things, and it's way too good, and it's just all free, and it's just awful. I assume you had a stroke and realized that and forgot that days exist. This card is very good. It's like, for the role of a 4-mana Planeswalker that dodges Pyroblast, this one is exceptional in it produces a threat, it draws cards, it can remove permanents, including Planeswalkers, because it's any target. It is a sacrifice outlet if you're interested in something like that. Like, there are a lot of words on this card that are really attractive. Yeah. The one downside, though, is that unlike most Planeswalkers, this one has an ETB trigger, which means that you can respond to that trigger. So you could stifle it, and you could stifle it making Boo the hamster. But the other thing is that normally when you play a Planeswalker, if it resolves, you have priority to activate it. So a great example of this is if I played Jace the Mind Sculptor and it sticks, I can +2 it before you can lightning bolt it, so it can survive a lightning bolt. Because you don't have a window to actually cast it. Whereas here, Minsc and Boo, this will come in, the trigger to put Boo onto the table will go onto the stack, and while that's there, you can bolt it and remove this target. So they will still get a hamster, but 4 mana for a 1/1, even though it's 4 mana for a 1/1 trample hamster. Trample hamster. Ooh, I love saying that. That ain't it. Now, the difference, though, is that if you do get it, then it is, if you have a means to sacrifice your creature every time, this is also just a really fat, bitter blossom to it. Like, there's so many words on this card, and all of them are so good. And I think the only thing holding it back from actually being a powerhouse, because it gets around Pyroblast, is specifically the ETB interaction and Lightning Bolt. And when Blue-Red Delver is the best deck, you have to really hard to convert this. But I just like that this is like a possible, like, I've been wanting a rug control style deck for a while, and there's no good top end, and this card feels like it could be a top end. Well, the one thing that I think is interesting about this card is because it's not blue, there is space in, I get that Uro is down at the moment, but the 4-color control decks that play, a smattering of random threats, and this seems like it could be in a really good space for something like that, because you have a recursive 6-power creature that if you ever wanted to, the -2 on this to just dome them for reach, or just being a really solid value Planeswalker that dodges Pyroblast. I think that's I keep reiterating that, but that's really the most powerful part of this card, is that it has powerful abilities that you want on a Planeswalker that isn't Pyroblastable and is in colors that aren't white, where there's a plethora of different Planeswalkers you could play between Wandering Emperor and Gideon and Elspeth and whatever, Well, here's the wild thing about this card, right? Let's say you put it into play and you're immediately attacking with a 4/4, right? It's got haste. Boom, you're attacking with a 4/4. Then you untap and you can attack with that 4/4 again and dome them. That's 12 damage in the course of 2 turns. It's a really fast clock. It's a really fast clock. You're drawing 4 cards in that sequence. And the other thing about this is that, similar to how Oko would come down and it was functionally a 3/3 haste a lot of the time, or old Tezzeret would make an artifact 5/5 haste. Those types of planeswalkers are really good at beating up other planeswalkers.
Yeah.
And in decks like 4-color or the control decks that would otherwise have difficulty with like Jeskai Days doing, where there's just like all these planeswalkers, and if you're not mainboarding Pyroblast, they're really difficult to deal with. A card like this could really do a lot of work in those types of matchups. So it's possible that like of all the cards that we talk about today, I think this one is going to be most likely to be like the sideboard pivot for those types of control deck. The thing about it is that I can see it have homes, which is why I'm high on it to actually see some play. I don't think it's as good as I thought it was when it was first spoiled, because I didn't think through the ETB interactions. But barring that, I think this will show up and people will be playing with it, because the power level on what it can do when it does get to do things is insane.
Yeah. I skipped over Tasha. I don't know. Do you think the Tasha is even worth talking about?
Too expensive.
Yeah, too expensive. That's what I thought. 5-mana planeswalkers are always a just rough go in this format.
The issue with these 5-mana planeswalkers that are essentially control cards is that it is actually much more of a weakness to be blue at that mana cost in Legacy than in other formats.
Yeah.
So in other spots where blue cards are good because you want to have a high enough blue count to support like a Force of Will count or whatever, once you get past like once you're past Jace the Mind Sculptor, which is already somewhat of a liability these days, like you have to be at 4 mana or lower and be doing something as powerful as what Jace can offer in order to take the risk for a format where Pyroblast is just ubiquitous at this point.
Mm-hmm. So next on the list, I put down Ancient Brass Dragon, but I really just want to talk about all of the ancient dragons as like reanimator targets. So the white one, so they all have different power and toughnesses. They all cost between 6 and 8 mana. The white one's 7 mana for a 7/10, and he makes a D20 fairy token, like the flying blue dragon fairy tokens when he hits. The blue one draws D20 cards, and then you have no maximum hand size for the rest of the game. He's an 8/8 for 8 mana. The black one is a 7/6. He reanimates X or less converted mana cost from the graveyard. All X or less threats, right? It says when you do, you may
total
put any
mana
number
value.
of targets. Oh, okay.
Total mana value.
Total
so
mana
if you roll a 10, you can pull 10 CMC worth of cards out of a graveyard.
Still very good. Copper Dragon makes treasures. He's a 6/5 for 6. And the Ancient Bronze Dragon, which is green, is 7 mana for a 7/7, and it's +1/+1 counters on each of up to 2 targets distributed, it looks like.
So theoretically, Ancient Bronze Dragon can come down as a 7 mana 27/27.
Yeah. Well, if it hits that turn.
If you hit the natural 20, yeah.
Yeah.
So none of these cards are going to see play because Griselbrand exists as
that's exactly where I'm going with this. Is like Ancient Silver Dragon, Ancient Brass Dragon both look interesting. Even the Ancient Gold Dragon, the Esper dragons look interesting in terms of like I would reanimate this and love it. And look, you could even make a point to say, look, because Archon of Cruelty exists, you can't even deal with these because Archon of Cruelty is very good, and you get that ETB trigger on top of it. But because Griselbrand exists, we're not going to be playing with any of these. And I think until Griselbrand leaves the format, which who knows if that'll ever happen, we're not gonna see any of these hit play. I'm excited to play them in my EDH Reanimator deck, but that's about it.
I think the other thing about these is that because you have to roll a d20 as part of their gimmick, that the only ones that you would even possibly conceivably consider are the ones that can't miss. So Brass Dragon, if you roll, like if you're playing a Reanimator deck, you're not putting not fat things in your graveyard. So if you roll like a 4 off of your d20 and then miss, and you just put a 7/6 flyer into play, you're going to feel really bad. Copper Dragon can't miss in that you're guaranteed at least 1 treasure, but that's not good enough for what it does.
I mean, I consider that missing. You should have to lose the game if you roll a 1 on any of these.
Ancient Bronze Dragon only giving you power isn't as good as something like Grave Titan, if that's what you're interested in. Yeah. And that's where I also bring, like, Silver Dragon is just competing with Griselbrand for drawing cards, and Griselbrand does it better, plus it has lifelink.
Yeah.
The Ancient Gold Dragon, I think, is probably the closest one because it's the only one that's doing anything
goes wide,
maybe unique. The thing is that for those types of deck, between Dark Ritual, Grave Titan's actually castable, like hard castable. So if you're interested in a threat that produces a board that goes wide that isn't legendary, there's no reason why you would move over to white, where here potentially you could roll, if you rolled a 13, like let's say your opponent didn't crack a fetch or whatever, they're still at 20, and you roll a 13 or above, you theoretically have lethal damage in the air, which is potentially really powerful. The issue though is that like the floor on it is so much lower than Grave Titan, which will more or less do something equivalent, and it's hard castable, which is a absolute game changer by comparison. So
Yeah.
I think these are too low by the standards of other fatties that they have available.
And you know, this goes in the on the list of other cards that we would have to consider if Grizzlebrand went away. We literally have to go scoop through like every set from the last like 10 years to see if something was worth playing over Grizzlebrand, or you know, without Grizzlebrand. Anyhow, so let's talk about Pact Weapon. That is a 4-mana equipment. It's 3 and a black, and it says this is the big part. As long as Pact Weapon is attached to a creature, you don't lose the game for having 0 or less life. When it attacks, draw and reveal a card. You get +X until end of turn, and you lose X life, where X is that card mana value, and it's equipped as discard a card. The reason why I even want to mention this card is the equip cost is relatively low, and the +X+O is negated by, like, the life loss there is negated by the fact that you can throw this onto, you know, like throw this onto a creature for free, and you don't lose the game if you hit something huge. And here's my other issue though, is the only deck that I could see this working in, and working is a stretch, is like Death and Taxes, because then you could just flash it in, you know, and then discard a card.
Yeah, I mean, it being 4 mana is pretty tough, but it is in the fast mana color. I think if this card sees play, it's obviously going to be a combo card. This is a Phyrexian Unlife that's in the color that it actually wants to be in. The thing is that it requires a creature. If this is part of some combo deck, I wouldn't be surprised, because it is a really powerful ability, and equipping for functionally free is really good. But that's more or less going to be it. It is a combo card, and for the most part, I think once you or your opponent discards a card to equip it, once it is equipped, the game should end. Whatever is going on with this card, the game should end. This is not like whenever it attacks, you draw a card and reveal it. That's if the combo was somehow otherwise disrupted.
Well, here's my stance, is the place that I think this will see play, if it does see play, is actually going to be in Death and Taxes out of the board. So like if you're playing against a deck that you know your opponent has no removal,
they got to splash black.
Yeah, but
they're not reaching into black for this card.
What do you mean you got to splash black? You just get it with what's it called?
You're not putting in equipment that you can't cast in your deck.
But okay, let's say you're playing against a deck that has no creature removal. If you slam this,
you're not putting this in your deck assuming that you're going to play against a format against decks that don't have any creature removal in the format where creature decks are the best decks.
Fair. All right. Well,
I think
anyhow, that's my stance.
I like your optimism on this card, but if it sees play, it's in a broken combo deck that we haven't foreseen yet.
All right. Next up, this is, speaking of broken combo decks, Stormking's Thunder. Stormking's Thunder is X, red. When you cast your next instant or sorcery, this spell, this turn, copy that spell X times. You may choose new targets for the copy. I am positive that this can be broken somehow. I just don't know how off the top of my head.
I think this card's artwork is broken.
The artwork is sick. Here's the thing. Do I know how this card's going to be broken? Do I think that there are better things you could be doing with your mana? Certainly. But I think that, like, you know, this might be something as like a weird backup plan in like Charbelcher or something like that. I don't know. But I just, it's a really interesting card, and we've seen this effect, but never to this level before. And I think it's worth mentioning and having in your back pocket as a thing that might happen.
There are 2 reasons why this card will never see play.
Triple
the first
red?
Is that it triple red, but it requires a lot of mana. You already need a lot of mana. You're not getting the first copy until you spend 4 mana. So there's no value to be had with this. It is part of the combo kill of whatever that combo kill may be.
Yeah.
So you need a ton of mana, and then by itself it does nothing. It needs something else as well. So not only do you need to have developed to the point where you have a ton of mana, you then also need to be in a high resource situation where you have a follow-up.
Ruby Storm, dude.
The combination of that in this format, I mean, it is an instant, but like there's just no way that this sees play. However, I think that this will be the premier art for playmats out of this set, because this is the best art for sure.
Art, yeah.
This is not close to the best art in the set.
All right, let's go with Volo, Itinerant Scholar, 2 in a blue for a 2/3 human wizard. When Volo enters the battlefield, create Volo's Journal, a legendary colorless artifact token with hexproof, and whenever you cast a creature spell, note one of its creature types that hasn't been noted for this artifact. Then you can tap 2 and tap Volo. Draw a card for each creature noted on the type. Draw a card. Draw a card for each creature noted for target permanent you control named Volo's Journal. Wow, that's a mouthful.
That was a journey. So
Yeah.
this card is way easier in practice than it is in the way that they have to template it for it. They have to template it this way so it actually works within the rules.
Yeah.
But it's way easier flavorfully with what they're going for. It just
it's Volo's Journal doing the tapping, but it's not.
Yeah. When it comes in, you create the journal. Every time you cast a creature, you know what kind of creature type it is for the journal, and then you tap the journal and draw cards equal to the number of creature types in the journal. It's a really simple concept that just requires an entire novel to get across within the rule set.
So my thought here is, if we look at a deck like Infect that plays like basically 3 different creature types, this gives decks that don't play the same creature type that want to kind of be a tribal deck a chance to go. Like even like OG Rug Delver, right? You've got human, you've got wizard, you've got mongoose, you've got goyf, right? Now you're drawing 4 cards. You know?
There's no way, dude. There's no way. 3 mana, 2/3 that then requires you to cast other things before.
This is the way this is set up is like this is a late game, mid game control card, right? Like when you're not playing this like, oh man, I need to get this out as fast as possible. But like if you get this out early and it sticks around for a little while, it's a lightning rod. Your opponent is gonna want to kill this thing, right? But I don't know. I just feel like there's something to this effect. And hitting just once, like if you draw like 3 cards or 4 cards off of this, it's going to feel pretty good, and your opponent's going to have to spend a card to get rid of it.
There's a distinct design choice with this card that will make it unplayable when it otherwise would have been, which is the ability to tap and draw cards equal to the number of creature types noted in Volo's journal is on Volo, not on the journal.
Yeah.
If it were on the journal, if he came in, gave you a hexproof artifact that had 2 tap, draw a card for each creature type noted on it, that's really powerful because now you have a draw engine that they can't remove from the table, that going long. But this is a 2/3 that needs mana every turn plus creatures every turn. So like, let's say you play this, it's a 2/3, you get the journal, it's awesome. You have to cast another creature. That creature then will put a note on Volo's journal.
Yeah.
Then you can tap 2 to draw a card. That's a lot of mana and a lot of things happening when your opponent's just casting a Murktide Regent.
Yeah, well, yeah. I think the hardest part of this is that the mana investment's big, but it's actually the fact that it doesn't necessarily do anything until you cast a second creature, right? That's the rough part. I like if I was playing Infect and had this in my deck, I've probably already lost like 2 or 3 creatures by the time this comes out. And so getting that 3rd or 4th creature, and also I'm not getting anything from my man lands, right? But I think if you could get the payoff of drawing like two cards off of this and your opponent being like, I gotta kill this thing. That's where like that's your best bet. It's such an interesting and weird effect that I almost feel like a Grixis pile deck would be like, I'll just play one. You know, I'm gonna get that back with whatever.
No, I mean this is a 3 mana. If you're playing Grixis, it's competing with Narset. You also are going to be priced into playing a bunch of creatures. It by itself isn't good enough. It's blue at 3 mana. It's just like it's a really cool card, but it has too many things, too many hoops, because it's not even a combo card in a sense that like you can't play it with like a changeling and then pick up and spam the changeling.
Yeah.
You know, like I mean, I guess you could because you could note a different creature type for whatever, but at that point it's like now I'm just explaining to you what a Lurin is, and they already have Uro.
Yeah. All right, so next is Laezel Velas Champion, Vlaakith's Champion. This is a 3-mana 3/3 for 2 and a white. If you would put a 1 or more counters on a creature or planeswalker you control or on yourself, put that many plus one of each of those kinds of counters on that permanent instead. Choose a background. The choose background, obviously not that important. 3-mana 3/3 is fine. I'm just trying to think, like, is there any time where we want to be putting, like, is anybody playing like a version of Death and Taxes with like Thalia's Lieutenant and what's that other new card, the one that gives +1 like at the beginning of combat?
So the explanation of all of these cards is that this card is going to be win more a lot of the time. If you're doing things where you're able to span a bunch of counters, it's already you're going to be good. Yeah. At 3 mana, it's not an enabler in Legacy. It would need to be a payoff. And there are cheaper versions of this effect at 2 mana. And there's a version on the enchantment at green for 1 mana. So this is not going to see play at all.
Yeah. All right.
As cool as it is.
Let's talk about Gale Waterdeep Prodigy. I talked with Jake about this a little bit, and I'm really coming around on this one. 2 and a blue for a 1/3 legendary human wizard. And it says, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell from your hand, you may cast up to 1 target card of the other type from your graveyard. If this spell is cast from your graveyard, then you exile it.
Yep. I mean, I think this card is too expensive. I think 3 mana is just like, at this point in Legacy, 3 mana is just way too much for something that doesn't give you immediate value. You're contending with Uro. You're contending with the 3 mana walkers from War of the Spark. You're contending with actual combo pieces like Show and Tell. It's just too steep. At 2 mana,
we're going to note this because later on, if this becomes Dreadhorde Arcanist,
I just think that like, so the difference is that like Dreadhorde Arcanist on a naked board with stuff in your graveyard plays, and it was whatever you wanted at 1 mana.
Yeah.
Whereas this one, if you want the bolt out of your yard, you need to cast a sorcery from your hand. Which means that there is an additional hoop that you actually need to jump through. This card's only going to be good in very high resource situations. This is not going to be good on a naked board. Plus it's 3 mana. Plus it's fragile and dies to everything in the format. I think that like the effect is really good. If this were to get rolling, it would be really powerful if you can protect it. But the thing is, I don't understand why anybody would sleeve this up as opposed to just putting Teferi Time Raveler in their deck. And that sucks because Teferi Time Raveler sucks. Yeah. And the format would be better without it. But
I think my biggest concern about this card, aside from what you mentioned, is let's say, you know, like you do, it's the end of your opponent's turn and you want to cast an instant. Well, now you're not getting all the value out because you can't cast that sorcery that you wanted to cast, you know? So that's my biggest concern is if you could, if it's allowed you to cast that sorcery at instant speed, we might have something here.
Yeah. I think the other thing about these cards is that they're in their prices reflected the fact that choose a background is functionally draw a card.
Yeah.
And in Legacy, that just has no text.
Yeah.
So it's all a little bit overcosted. Whereas like if it didn't have choose a background, maybe they make it 1 in a blue and then maybe we're having a different conversation. Yeah. But otherwise, I think Gale is just going to be a cool card that we'll never actually play with.
In that light, and I only want to touch on this for just a second, is Wyll, Blade of Frontiers, who is a 1/1 for 1 in a red and reads, if you would roll 1 or more dice, instead roll that many dice +1 and ignore the lowest result. Whenever you roll 1 or more dice, put a +1/+1 counter on Wyll, Blade of Frontiers. And my only question is there any card that allows you to roll like an unlimited number of dice that this card just accidentally automatically combos with?
That's the only way that it'll be playable.
Yeah, because that's the thing is like I couldn't think off the top of my head as I was looking through these for this episode, but I was like, I wonder if there's like, you know, as what like that chicken from Unglued that like lets you roll 2 dice whenever it attacks or something.
Yeah, I mean this one is roll 1 or more dice, so the card would have to allow you to cast.
Yeah, well, it'd be like a 0, roll a die, you know, like
for that's what it is.
Every
like
instance of die rolling.
Yeah, so I think isn't there an Ifrit? No, the Ifrit is flip a coin, not roll
that's flip a coin,
so.
And that's and that goes along with Chance Encounter, which is actually the what's it called? It is the splinter twin of that format. What is that? What is that format called? Chance Encounter. There it is. Of pre-modern.
I'm not sure, but
so Chance Encounter reads, Whenever you would flip a coin, put a luck counter on chance counter. At the beginning of your upkeep, if chance counter has 10 or more luck counters, you win the game.
Right.
So it's literally,
so
it's
flip the coins 10 times. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you would need the card that would need to roll the dice would need to allow you to roll an infinite number of instances of dice rolling, as opposed to just
just like how pick a number. Yeah.
It's not roll X dice, because that would only put 1 plus counter. I think we're never going to see this in play, because that implies that you're playing dice rolling cards in your deck, in which case your deck is going to be bad.
Yes, very true. Okay, so White Plume Adventure is a 2 mana and 1 white, 3/3, or cleric. Whenever White Plume Adventure enters the battlefield, you take the initiative. At the beginning of each of your opponent's upkeep, untap all creatures you control. If you've completed a dungeon,
untap a creature. A creature.
And if you've completed a dungeon, untap all creatures. So the only reason I talk about this card is because Take the Initiative is basically like kind of a slightly less powerful, at first at least, version of the Monarch, right? And this is the only card I saw that looks somewhat playable, as far as like, you could throw this in and like the incidental value, it seems okay. Just as a 3 mana 3/3. I mean, no one's like hankering for a 3 mana 3/3 for sure. But the untappability, so that's something. And then take the initiative. So getting to use the initiative, I think, and going into the Undercity is the big part here.
I think that like I hate to be the downer, but again, this card is like, Legacy is just too powerful at the moment. Like a 3 mana 3/3 that doesn't draw a card, taking the initiative is like, it's an effect. It's not bad, but it's not draw a card. And there are too many 3-drops that ETB and just draw a card plus something else.
So you think that a 4-drop that exiles a creature and then draws a card at the end of turn is better in the prisoner guard guy than taking the initiative as a 3/3?
You mean Palace Jailer?
Yeah, Palace Jailer.
Well, Palace Jailer is a removal spell that also theoretically draws you, just gives you a personal Howling Mine. That's entirely different. That Howling Mine is then on the board for the rest of the game, and theoretically is drawing you more than one card.
Well,
playing it in the position you want.
The thing to point out about
take the initiative one time.
No, take the initiative happens at the beginning of your upkeep as long as you have the initiative.
Right, but I'm saying that even if you go through the dungeon, like let's say you take the initiative 5 times, is that still better than just having the Monarch one time?
I mean, yes, then it is, but yeah, I mean, I totally get what you're saying. Like I said, this is a card I picked because I think this is the closest we're gonna get, and this at least, to taking the initiative and actually seeing it be close to playable, which is a shame because I really like the idea.
I would, don't get me wrong, I would love it if a bunch of cards from this set would make it, because they are fun looking cards. I think the format is just, constrained by all of the power creep from the last couple of years, where every 3-drop has to either win the game by itself immediately or draw a card and do something else that's broken, Yeah.
All right, let's check out Descent into Avernus. This is another 3 mana card, 2 and a red for a enchantment that reads, at the beginning of your upkeep, put 2 descent counters onto Descent into Avernus. Then each player creates X treasure tokens, and Descent into Avernus deals X damage, where X is the number of counters on Descent into Avernus. So this is very close to a like Sulphurous Vortex card, but it's like kind of giving both players like access to a lot of mana.
Hold on, I need just a little bit second longer to understand what this paragraph is saying, so I can calculate my thoughts as to understand what I thought when I first read this card.
So every turn it's doing 2 damage, and then it's adding 2 counters and doing 2 more damage,
and then 2 more,
two
so
more
it's,
damage.
It's
so it's
cumulative
like
every
2,
turn. Yes.
4, 6. Like it can really spin out of control. Now it's doing it to both players.
Yes. Then each player creates treasure tokens, and Descent into Madness deals X damage to each player, where X is the number of descent counters on it, which means that it's sort of like a sulfuric vortex, except it doesn't have the most important line of text on that card, which is players can't gain life. And this also, at the beginning of your upkeep, will also ramp your opponent twice.
Yes. It ramps you too, though. So there's parity there at least.
Helping your opponent though
it's bad. Yes, of course.
If in the format, if you're playing a card that voluntarily helps your opponent at no cost for your opponent, it's unplayable. Yeah. Unless it ends the game immediately, but this one doesn't.
This one comes close to ending the game pretty quickly, though. This can get out of control really fast.
But you just said it yourself, right? Like, we're not playing this if Sulfuric Vortex exists.
If
we're interested in the damage, if we're interested in damage, I get that this kills faster, but the thing is that, like, the one thing that if I'm under a Sulfuric Vortex that I need to help me get out from under it is more resources to cast my spells to help me get out of it. So if you play this on 3, and then on your next turn, I now have 6 mana at my disposal, I'm way more likely to be able to find my answer to this card than if I were stuck on 3 mana or 2 mana and can't get under it.
I didn't write
it down. There's no prison effect.
I didn't write it down, but we should talk about Archivist of Oghma for 2 mana as a 2/2 with flash that says whenever an opponent searches their library, you gain a life and draw a card.
Say that again?
Whenever an opponent searches their library, you gain a life and draw a card.
Oh, yeah, on the 2 mana 2/2. Yeah.
So that card's just obviously pretty playable, I think.
This one seems obviously playable to me, but I don't know if it's actually going to see play because it doesn't disrupt your opponent in a meaningful way. Yeah. It helps you, and therefore it's good. But it's a 2/2 for 2 that your opponent theoretically could play around. And the ones where, like, the decks that you're playing this in, let's say you're playing this and your opponent is on Storm and they're searching their library a bunch and you're drawing a bunch of cards and gaining a bunch of life. If you're not in a deck that doesn't have ways to interact with them, getting cards out of their deck from those tutor effects, then it's not actually going to net you any benefit except you're going to have more spells to look at while you die.
Yeah.
If you are playing this in a deck like that, that means that you're devoting a slot in your deck to being a 2 mana 2/2 that your opponent could play around. Like, if the game has sufficiently developed, like if the game hasn't developed and this is a 2 mana 2/2 and somehow it sticks around and your opponent has to fetch in order to develop and you're just drawing cards, that's great. But your opponent will get to choose, for the most part, when this thing will trigger. Maybe not on the first go because you have flash, in which case you're gonna traded a 2 mana 2/2 to get a card. But the fact that it's
and a life,
and a life, it's not that this card is bad. It's just that, like, the first time you get somebody with it, right? Like, okay, it's my turn 2. You were on the play. I crack a fetch to get my second mana source.
They keep going.
You put this into play. You get a life and draw a card. The thing is that I'm not going to feel too bad about the fact that you got that first card because you had to offset the fact that this card was in your deck, and a 2 mana 2/2 ain't it, right? Yeah. So if I can just maneuver around this card in any reasonable capacity, the fact that it's not disrupting me beyond, like, if I need to continue cracking fetches in order to develop, but let's say you're running let's say average you're running 20 lands. Let's say 8 or 9 of them are fetch lands, right? Which means that you're going to hit approximately 50%, a little under 50% of my mana base, which means that not only would this card, could I play around this card with my fetch lands potentially, but I would also need to draw the correct half of my deck that you don't have control over in order for this to trigger. So the longer I thought about this, the longer I was off of it, even though the text is seemingly powerful. So I wouldn't be surprised if it showed up in some number, but I think the fact that it's competing against other things that are extremely disruptive, like Thalia, Spirit of the Labyrinth, like value 2-drops, like Stoneforge Mystic.
My biggest gripe about this card is that the deck that would play this is not the deck that wants to play this, right? Like, you would rather play this in a blue, like a blue control deck where you could use that to your advantage by gaining counter spells and then disrupting your opponent's plan, right? But that's not the deck that's going to even play this. It's going to be in a Death and Taxes deck that's already, like, there's other cards are doing that, but it's not. If your opponent goes off and, like, has to search the deck twice in a turn or something like that, you're not going to stop them from doing that with your stuff, and they might have used that already to win the game at that point.
Yeah, the fact that to get the value off the card, it's based on a condition that you don't control. Yeah. And because you don't control that condition, it's not a reliable means to actually get that effect, even though you might incidentally get that effect every once in a while. The fact that you can't control the game state where this will trigger and matter means that it's really, really difficult to figure out how to build this build a deck with this in mind as a meaningful card.
Yeah. All right. Next is Abdel Adrian Gorion's Ward. We talked about this last week, but I wanted to bring it up here too, just in case you're didn't check out last week or you're just seeing what's what on this review. This is a 5 mana that's 1 white and 4 colorless for a 4/4 legendary human warrior. When Abdel Adrian Gorion's Ward enters the battlefield, exile any number of other non-land permanents you control until it leaves the battlefield. Create a 1/1 white soldier token for each permanent exiled this way. So this is basically just like a possibly castable version of World Gorger Dragon.
And I was thinking about that too, because I remember when this card was first spoiled and everybody was like, oh, it's a World Gorger that's been fixed because you can choose to stop the loop if you want to. And I was like, well, there's something really distinctly different about this and why it's not as powerful as World Gorger is that it's non-land permanents. Yes. World Gorger gives you infinite mana. And that's part of a lot of its combo kills is you'll kill with a particular land, whether it's Prana Marsh or the land that, or Nephalia Drownyard or whatever it is that people did once upon a time. You know, whatever the land-based combo is, where it means that you could reanimate on an empty board with only otherwise land. Yeah. This one requires you to have something else on the table to exile in order to at least get the 1/1s. I just don't. I don't think it's.
Well, it's going to start
enough,
with
right?
It's going to start with the Abdel, right, and then.
Well, Abdel is going to remove the enchantment, and then it will go away, and the enchantment will come back, and then you bring back Abdel the same way that you do it with World Gorger.
Yeah.
So you can theoretically, if you're doing that, you make infinite 1/1s, but infinite 1/1s is not a kill.
Not doing it. Right? Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Infinite 1/1s.
You'll need a like Altar of Dementia or something like that to win, right?
Yeah, it's possible that this is better in exactly that combo if you think that having a 4 mana 4/4 that's reasonably castable and Empty the Warrens is good enough. But in actuality, if you're playing this card and you put it into play and just empty the Warrens for infinite, that's good enough if you get to untap.
Yeah.
But the fact that you get to untap and the fact that you have to pass the turn with your combo deck seems not strong enough.
Yeah, it's no one loves to pass the turn with their combo deck.
I haven't played enough World Gorger Dragon to know if that's a reasonable thing to do or not, but it would strike me as
we'll have to have Phil on for that.
If you're playing a bad card in your deck, like Abdel or World Gorger, and you're doing it in a combo shell, like anything with Animate Dead, then it would make sense to me that you don't actually have the built-in redundant resiliency to pass the turn.
Yeah. I've never had to say his last name out loud. Phil Nguyen.
He's great.
Dragon.
Yeah, he's fantastic.
Yeah, that's our guy for World Gorger Dragon tech.
Yeah,
in every format that allows it.
If anybody's figuring out if Abdel is the way to go, it's going to be him, and I hope that he does. And I hope that when he does, I'm not sitting across the table from him.
Yes. All right. Next on the list here, we have Viconia Drow Apostate. This is a 3 mana, 2 and a black for a 2/3 elf cleric. At the beginning of your upkeep, if there are 4 or more creature cards in your graveyard, return one creature, a card at random, creature card at random from your graveyard to your hand. The only place I'm seeing this is like we get at least 1 to 2 of these a set. This could go in Nick Fit.
You say the only place I can see it, and that's one more place than I can see it.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Let's move on. Ellen's Gloomstalker. What's this thing called? Erinis Gloomstalker. This is another 3 mana 3/3, 2 and a green for a death touch. Whenever Erinis Gloomstalker attacks, return target land from your graveyard to the battlefield. This one I actually think might have something going on with it.
This one's a little bit more interesting to me because it is a Green Sun Zenith target. It having death touch is maybe relevant in certain metagames. Because you have to attack to return a land from your graveyard to the battlefield, the obvious comparison is Ramunap Excavator.
Yeah.
Ramunap Excavator lets you have it after you Green Sun Zenith for it.
Yes.
So you could Green Sun for the Ramunap and get a land back. This is going to need to untap.
Yes.
And that's why I think it's not going to get there.
I'm going to say this. This is a card that, like, in later episodes, when we talk about building budget decks, this is close to Ramunap Excavator. What's Ramunap, like $8, $9 card? This is an uncommon. It's probably going to be like a $2, $3 card.
So this is significantly worse in that
yes,
you having to attack means that you need to untap to get the land. When you attack, that's when you put the land in, which means that you can't have it in your first main phase after you have untapped with it. There's a lot of hurdles that having to attack changes about getting an additional land out of your yard. The difference, though, that if this card does see play in certain metagames is if Death Touch is actually meaningful in any capacity. Maybe if Eldrazi was everywhere, this might be
because then you could legit block with it.
All the best decks have creatures that have evasion, so I don't see this making it over Ramunap because it's just not as powerful.
Yep. All right.
It's close.
Imoen, Mystic Trickster. It's like hard thing to say, two easy things to say. Imoen, Mystic Trickster. This is another 3-mana card. It's 2 and a blue for a 2/3 human rogue wizard ward 2. And at the beginning of your end step, if you have the initiative, draw a card, draw another card if you've completed a dungeon. This is one of those initiative cards, but I kind of thought it gave you the initiative too, but it doesn't. So I don't know. I think next, right?
This one's I think of all of the cards that we've talked about with the initiative so far, this one's the closest in that. It being a 3-mana 2/3 with Ward 2, Ward 2 is actually relevant text, and it means that it's a little bit more interesting. But the fact that it doesn't actually do anything unless something else has given.
Yeah, we need a card to like make the initiative happen, and I haven't really seen anything like that. So that's not that other guy.
Like once again, you're spending 3 mana for a 2/3, which is not a relevant body, and then in order to draw a card, you have to have done something else. Yeah. Oro will give you the card plus put himself in the graveyard plus gain you 3 life. The walkers all give you selection plus another static powerful ability that just makes it so that your opponent doesn't get to have any fun. It's the power level is too high.
Yeah. All right. Here's a weird one. Wild Magic Surge. Destroy target. It's 2 red mana for an instant. Destroy target permanent an opponent controls. Its controller reveals the top card of their library until they reveal a permanent that shares a card type with that permanent. They put that onto the battlefield and the rest onto the bottom in random order. I like the only thing I can think of is like you're like that mono red prison deck, and you're like, I'm just gonna get rid of this thing because it's stopping me from playing the game or whatever. But like aside from that, I really can't think of anything off the top of my head. It just looked like it's a really cool effect in mono red.
Yeah, if there was a mono red deck, if there was maybe a mono red combo deck that needed a way to remove the permanent that's keeping them from winning the game, but it's not guaranteed, as is the case with a lot of red cards. I mean, if it sees play, it's going to see play in that type of role player. Yeah. It's going to be your.
It's really tough in a non-singleton format because, like, there's a very good chance. Like, let's say you need to get rid of that enchantment. There's a very good chance your opponent is playing more than one of that enchantment. It might be the only enchantment in his deck.
Right. Yeah.
He's just going to hit it again.
It is one of those things where if my opponent, when I read this card, the first thing that always comes to mind is like, what's the lens that this would be played against me in? And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, well, I'm playing Miracles with Counterbalance, and if they like use their Wild Magic Surge to hit my Counterbalance,
and you missed,
okay,
the best part would be
resolve.
You revealed Counterbalance with it and countered it instead.
Even if I missed, I'd be like, okay, Counterbalance dies. I will flip cards until I reveal my other Counterbalance and put it into play.
What a bunch of daggers. Yeah. So yeah, I just think it's just a neat effect, and it's something to like keep in your back pocket as like a maybe you'll need that later on kind of thing.
You know what this reminds me of that didn't see any play, but also had this like a similar wow effect when you first read it because it's cheap and it's an instant. I mean, this one was a sorcery, but it's the white sorcery that like removed something, and then your opponent could put a permanent from their hand into play, and that never saw any play because it just ritualed your opponent if their board was crazy. But it did something similar. It was like destroy a permanent, and then they get to put something in from their hand, which is more or less similar to this. And it's just not good. There's too many cards that just remove things without giving your opponent something back.
Yeah. All right. Next is Mystery Key. This is a 2-mana equipment that says equip for 1. And when a crypt creature deals combat damage to a player, sacrifice Mystery Key. If you do, draw 3 cards. This is like a thing where like I don't think it's outwardly great, but I like drawing 3 cards, and I could see thinking about playing this in 8 cast. I just don't think I would right now.
You have so many cards that draw cards that don't require you to jump through so many hoops.
That's the thing is, if this was 1 mana, if it was 1 blue, I'd be in a second.
Yeah, for sure.
But
so I mean,
I think
here's
it's
the thing:
1 mana too expensive.
The thing is that like when you on its face, it looks like it's a 2 mana draw 3 potentially, but it's not.
It's 3 mana
draw 3 that also that 3 mana draw 3 that required you to have a creature that required that creature to get in. So
and also, come on, you can't give me like a +1/+0 or something. Like, give me something. I get you with a key.
It's too much. Like the payoff
Get
is
in there
nice.
and
Like
stick them with the key.
Ancestraling is obviously a big deal, but if even if there was like some kind of, if it was an enabler of some kind, like if this also was equip discard a card because then you draw cards as the payoff, like.
Okay, Phil, but what about how do you feel about this and Emery?
No. What?
No.
Emery's not attacking.
No. Emery's getting this back.
Yeah, but if you wanted to do that, you're just bringing back your thought monitor. Like,
yeah, but thought monitor costs 7, man. Come on, get out of here.
No, it doesn't. Thought monitor costs 1 or 2. What are you talking about?
Early on, though, you're not gonna. I mean, I get.
Dude, come on, you're not spending your first turn going, okay, let me play 2 artifacts so I can put Emery into play, and then on turn 2, if I have fast mana, let me sleeve up my Emery and get in there. Like. That's not what that.
I'm just saying, getting this back with Emery doesn't seem like the worst. But I think you're right. You'd rather do other things. Next is a card I actually think we'll see play, and that's Sailor's Bane. This is a 9 mana 7/7 that has Ward 4 and says this spell costs 1 less for each card you own in exile and in your graveyard. That's an instant, sorcery, or a card that has adventure.
Yes.
So I like this specifically because of that exile clause, because this also counts your Force of Wills too.
I think that this card is the closest thing to legacy playable so far in this set. And I think what is the actual powerful part about it, beyond the fact that it's Ward 4, is the exile clause, like you said. I think if your opponent.
No, you got it. Go on.
Well, I was gonna say if your opponent, like nowadays when people are playing against something like blue-red, if they bring in their Leyline of Leyline of the Voids, or if they bring in the Rest in Peace, those are big deals and will turn off your Murktide Regents.
Exactly.
Whereas for Sailor's Bane just doesn't care. Sailor's Bane is going to be a 2 mana 7/7 once you have the instants and sorceries required to cast it. So it is way easier for you to just jam this through your opponent's hate because it doesn't care about graveyard hate.
And you'll have to excuse me for this, Phil, and that's why this is not as good as this. We'll put that in post.
Perfect.
Fix it in post.
It is like a really powerful threat, though. Like the idea that the idea that this just doesn't care, like it cares about things in your graveyard, but it doesn't care about graveyard hate, and that is
exactly
that is a monumental difference in how you evaluate.
I think of the number of times someone's completely just gotten me when I played Rug Delver and like turned off they played like Rest in Peace, turned off my Nimble Mongoose and my Goyf. Like if I had this, I'd just be like, all right, I'm just gonna keep trucking,
Whatever, make a 7/7. Yeah. The difference is that like this is going to this will be very good against the decks that are trying to beat you on the axis of dealing with your graveyard. Whereas like this type of card will be way better against decks that are dealing with the graveyard or looking at the graveyard as the weakness to exploit. Whereas creature decks that can just stand in the way of a 7/7 and don't care about a fat beater, because this thing doesn't have evasion, it doesn't have trample, so just a bunch of bodies in the way is really going to be where the flaw in this card is. But I think there will be an interesting dance of, if your opponent is going to bring in graveyard hate, if you pivot and bring in Sailor's Bane and they're not playing a bunch of chump blockers, what will likely happen is this will just be the Abyss in that position. And yeah, I am not sold on this card being ubiquitous in Legacy, but I'm sold on it seeing play in Legacy.
Yeah, for sure. All right, next is this is a wonky one. It's one of those adventure cards. I chose Gray Slaad. It's got Entropic Decay, which is a black, a colorless sorcery that says mill 4 cards, and then it is a 4/1 for 1 black and 2 colorless. It says as long as there are 4 more creature cards in your graveyard, it has menace and death touch. I think the thing I'm looking at here is the mill 4 cards aspect of this. Also being able to play it as a menace 4/1 is nice, but this is like a possible enabler for other decks, I think.
I don't see it because I think it's too expensive for what it is. And like menace and death touch is fine, but not on a 3 mana spell. And milling 4 cards for 2 mana ain't it. So maybe if this card was like if you had 4 more creature cards in your graveyard, you could cast it from your graveyard. Now we're talking, but
yeah. Well, I'm thinking like, in Dredge where you want those things. Look, Dredge is going to probably say, I don't play enough Dredge to know, but I'm sure a Dredge player is going to be like, no, there are so many 1,000 other better ways to get creatures into the graveyard or to get anything in the graveyard. But
there are
milling 4 cards, hitting a Dredger, and then being able to go from there it seems enticing.
This is milling at sorcery speed, and you already have, Faithful Fluting, Careful Study, Breakthrough. Like you're not waiting till turn 2 to do this.
Okay, this next one is pure comedy. It's band together. It is a 3 mana instant, so 2 in a green. It says up to 2 target creatures you control each deal each deal damage equal to their power to another target creature. I'm just mad this doesn't have banding. Like they should have banding, man.
Yeah,
band together.
The fact that it doesn't give 2 target creatures banding is really
and they become bards. Come on.
Yeah.
But also the flavor text is amazing. Boo. Let's see how this miscreant handles a Fury Missile of Justice.
A furry missile of justice.
Furry missile of justice.
Come on, bro.
So that's great. I read this card. I looked at it. I showed it to my wife. My wife loves hamsters. This card's great. You should play in all of your legacy decks. Moving on to Reckless Barbarian. It is a 2 mana. Let's find him here. Reckless Barbarian is a 2 mana 2/2 Dragon Barbarian that says sacrifice Reckless Barbarian to add 2 red mana to your mana pool. And the only thing I can think of for this is like this is a way to get it almost is a Tinder Wall, right?
It's a
for like a Charbelcher.
Yeah.
I think I don't know enough about Charbelcher to say like would they want this?
No.
When they obviously have a lot of other things they can go with, but
2 mana, and then
it can't attack.
You mana? No.
All right. Gluntch the Bestower, all the way down the green cards. I just want to talk about this card because where is he at? Gluntch the Bestower. So this is a 3 mana. It's a 1 green and white for an 0/5 flying jellyfish. So at the beginning of your end step, choose a player. They put 2 +1/+1 counters on each creature they control.
On a creature they control.
Oh, on A. Sorry, I was reading that wrong. I was like, I was like, holy crap! I read that card wrong initially. On a creature they control, and choose a second player to draw a card. The third part of this is never going to happen in Legacy. But of those 2, basically every turn you're either drawing an extra card and putting a +1/+1 counter on your opponent or 2 +1/+1 counters on one of your opponent's creatures, or vice versa. You're putting 2 +1/+1 counters on one of your creatures and they're drawing an extra card.
So there's something that I'm missing here that I'm going to ask. If your opponent doesn't have a creature, you can't target them with the 2 +1/+1 counters, right?
Correct.
Because it doesn't say put 2 +1/+1 counters on up to a creature they control.
No. It says choose. It says choose a player. So you choose a player. Boop. I'm choosing
right.
Phil. I'm choosing you. You're going to put up to 2 target. You're going to put 2 +1/+1 counters on a creature you control.
But if I don't have a creature,
fizzles.
then it just fizzles.
And I'll draw a card.
Still draw a card.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're saying that in the best scenario is this is just a 3 mana 0/5 flyer that is a Howling Mine that hopefully does not does not pump your opponent's creatures.
But you have that choice, right? Like you could say, "Oh, okay, I'll pump this instead. You draw a card." But
you're never doing that. There's no world.
I realize
there's no world you would ever do that.
The reason I bring this card up is because it feels like it would be playable if you got to choose the third option too. Like if it was like
just create 2 treasure tokens.
Yeah, like you're like, okay, you'll get 2 treasure tokens, I'll draw a card. Or like
No.
being able to
You
have
would
that
never-
option.
You would never give your opponent mana. You would never let them draw a card. You
Fair
would
enough.
only let them put 2+1/+1 counters on a creature if they control no creatures.
All right, finally, the last card I have listed here is the Baba Yaga card. What's her name? Baba Lysaga, Night Witch.
Oh, bro, you don't want to talk about Jan Jansen? Jan Jansen.
I feel like we should have to have Nate on if we're going to talk about three mana Mardu creatures.
We're gonna do specialty episode about the Mardu creatures.
Just let Nate scream for like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
It'll just be Nate going.
Yeah, just feeling so bad. Yeah.
All right, so this is a human warlock for 1, a black, a green. It says tap and sacrifice up to 3 permanents. If there were 3 or more card types among the sacrifice permanents, each opponent loses 3 life. You gain 3 life and draw 3 cards.
Too much. Too many things. You need too many things. Sacrifice up to 3 permanents. You need too many other permanents.
Well,
you need so many permanents.
You don't necessarily need that many permanents.
You
so
need
artifact
so many
and
permanents.
creature on an artifact creature is 2 things.
Bro, okay, so you're telling me that you're going to wreck your board? Yeah, I'm going. Let me sacrifice
to
my Baleful
to
Strix.
healing not healing vortex.
I'm going to sacrifice
Lightning
my Baleful
Vortex.
Strix and a land. I'm going to give up my entire board presence just so I can. No, come on now.
Fair enough. That's interesting, and it says draw 3, so we have to talk about it.
I think the other card that we want to talk about, which is also we can wait for Nate on this one also, is Mahadi Emporium Master, which is another 3-drop, obviously. But it's 1 black red for a 3/3. At the beginning of your end step, create a treasure token for each creature that died this turn. Now I know that there are ways that we can spam death triggers, and netting treasure at the end of your turn for all of those that happened is pretty good. I wish this card were a zombie. I would love to be able to sacrifice my Gravecrawler a bajillion times and make a bunch of tokens on the end step, but that is not the case. But it is still a powerful effect that gives you stuff for free if you're doing something that I assume your deck would already want to be doing. So that actually is an interesting card. It won't see any play in Legacy, but it looks pretty powerful.
That's kind of all I had. I didn't see any artifacts that looked like they were worth talking about.
No.
I guess let's talk about the commander cards that are out, because there's a couple of those that are worth just giving a shout out to. But I don't think there's a ton in the set that have that have been spoiled so far. I think everything's been spoiled at this point.
Yeah, I think the whole thing's spoiled. Yeah.
Yeah. So Delayed Blast Fireball is interesting, but I don't think playable. That is a 1 colorless and 2 red for an instant. Says Delayed Blast Fireball deals 2 damage to each creature and each opponent they control, each opponent and each creature they control. If this spell is cast from exile, it deals 5 instead, and it's got Foretell of 6. So if you cast it for 6, you deal 5 damage to the whole board and to your opponent.
Crazy.
That's not you. It's cool, but wouldn't you just rather play with like Bonfire of the Damned?
Sure would.
And then
you gonna play Maze's End with all these new gates?
I actually I have I'm working on a commander deck right now. Actually, it's going to be Garth. Garth
Garth Gates
will be Garth Gate.
Garth Gate. Yeah.
And I can be like, I could keep playing the Jimi Hendrix song behind me while I'm like.
There you go. Yeah.
Dun, 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 Foxy.
Yeah. I think
I can say things like, when I put the final gate down, I can say, it's like we're looking at Wayne's basement, but that's not Wayne's basement. Garth, I think that's a haiku.
I thought there was a good gate card for the gate deck. I mean, gates can't exist in Legacy because Wasteland exists and they don't actually do anything and they're all bad, but and they all come into play tapped. But and I'm somebody who's pretty forgiving for lands that come into play tapped because I play a lot of Mystic Sanctuary. Yeah. But as good as Baldur's Gate looks in you being able to be your Cabal coffers for gates, it is not going to be good enough for Legacy. So
well, before we spoil the final card, the last card to talk about, let's talk about Moxfield real fast.
Talking about Moxfield.
Moxfield is an amazing deck building website that you should be checking out. Go to moxfield.com, check that out. It uses Scryfall, so you can tag your entire deck differently. You can find cards really easily. The site looks super good on PC, on Mac, and on mobile. You don't need an app. It's a great place to share legacy decks. It's also a great place to share commander decks. I have something like 70 commander decks and a good amount of legacy decks on there. So you can check out our link below. It costs you nothing to check it out. It's completely free. It doesn't even affect us in a positive way. We don't get like a click thing for it. You're just going to do yourself a favor, and you're going to be checking out a very, very nice website that you should be using instead of like Tapped Out or something. Why are you still using Tapped Out? Stop it. Stop using Tapped Out.
How about
Get out
Moxfield?
of here.
Yeah.
Stop that.
How about Moxfield instead?
Do Moxfield. Stop using archaic methods Phil, quit using freaking Post-it notes to write your deck ideas down.
I have so many posts. Before Moxfield, my desk area, my place of work here at home was just overloaded with Post-it notes full of deck lists that were bad. And then I took them and I posted them to Moxfield, and then the deck lists were great.
And now they're good.
So,
and now the decks are good.
Now they're good deck lists. Yeah.
Anyhow, I think that does it for us. Oh wait, what?
We have one more card. One more card that I just wanted to point out that we didn't say is that of all of the gates, the actual good gate card is Heap Gate. Heap Gate is a gate that produces a colorless or attached with another mana source to make a mana of any color. That stuff's that's shitty. But if you tap 1 mana plus it plus another gate, that means it's 3 mana. That means you get a treasure token. Now, before I was on Moxfield, I had a bunch of Post-it notes with a bunch of cards like that. And now that I'm on Moxfield, all of my deck lists don't have any cards like that, and it's way better.
Yep. All right, our final card is Deep Gnome Taromancer. It is another white 2/2 with flash that has Mold Earth. Whenever one or more lands enters the battlefield under opponent's control without being played, you may search your library for a plains and put it onto the battlefield tapped and shuffle. You can do this only once per turn. Man, Phil, this card seems like a card that, like, I feel like you could do it. I feel like you could be like, you know what? I'm gonna ramp in Azorius. I'm gonna get my tapped Tundra and just feel good about myself and maybe swing in for a couple of points of damage.
You know what the problem? So for everybody who's like, oh, this only works when your opponent casts a Cultivate or some shit. No, it works on every fetch land because a fetch land puts a land into play without them playing it from hand.
It's bonkers in EDH. Like you're going to be putting
in EDH.
You're going to have your whole, like, you've got 3 opponents. They're all going to be ramping. It's all you do in EDH.
Everybody's fucking playing Nature's Lore in EDH, but nobody's doing that in Legacy. So again, similar to the other white card that cared about when your opponent searches libraries, this one will care about fetch lands, and that's pretty much it because there isn't anything else that really puts lands into play outside of hand. Even Uro only puts lands in from hand. So it's really only going to be fetch lands that this is going to ramp you. And the problem is that even when you flash this in, even when you get them, right, fetch on the stack, play this Mold Earth Gnome. Fuck you. Then you're like, all right, dude, go get your land. You got me. And you functionally just played an instant speed rampant growth because you have a 2/2 that who cares? Who cares? Who cares?
Yeah. All right. Well, that's all the cards, I think. That's all the cards.
I would like to postpartum apologize here for all of my negativity on all of these cards that are cool, but just not there because
unfortunately,
2019 to 2021.
You know, we had high hopes
really
for the set, I think, Phil. We had high hopes for the set because it was a commander set, skip standard, you know, and it turns out that they're just you know, straight up fire printing standard into being better than legacy a lot of times, I think.
Yes. Yeah.
So
I mean,
it didn't even matter.
That's the problem.
It didn't even matter. Yeah. I'm looking forward to the next set, which I think the spoilers will start dropping in about a week. So we can start talking about that.
Oh, that's good. That's good. I have a little bit more breathing time. I thought they were going to be spoiled in the next half hour. So
get that hype train going, right?
Yeah, let's hype it up.
Anyhow, thanks for joining us on this never-ending hype train that is spoiler season for the last year and a half. That's it for us. Once again, I'd like to thank our Patreon sponsors. If you're a Patreon person, you're helping us out a lot. We're able to make some really cool content because of you. We've got a whole bunch of ideas in the pipeline too that I think you're going to really like. Phil did a new intro for Cantrip Cartel, so you should go over and check those guys out and hear Phil's new intro. What else?
I've also if the Cantrip Cartel intro, if you are listening to if you're watching this on YouTube, you won't have been able to hear it, so you got to go listen to them. But if you also listen to us on any podcast platform, if you actually listen to the audio version of this podcast, you will have heard the Cantrip Cartel's intro as our intro this week, just so everybody could hear it and really, go over there, check those guys out. They're great. And I think the intro's pretty good. And hope you dig all the
like and subscribe. Do it. Hey, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Check out this other video. You'll probably like it.